Thank you, Mr. Martin. Mr. Cadd, followed by Mr. Kirk.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board, staff, ladies and gentlemen. I come before you this morning to speak about the Integrated Regional Water Management Group, and specifically the Northern Sacramento Valley Integrated Regional Water Group. Have been attending quite a number of these meetings between the board and then the TAC committee meetings. And the main thing that's driving this is the California Department of Water Resources. And the Department of Resources is using the Proposition 84-1E guidelines. It's quite 84 pages of quite a setup in these guidelines of how cities, county, community service districts can apply for water grants. Now in the state, if you want to get a state water grant, you have to go through this IRWM process. Well, in the IRWM process, there are 16 standards, of which this group has completed their goals and objectives. But of the 16 standards, there's also a portion called data management. Data management is greenhouse gas management. And then there's also climate change, which is climate change climate action plan. What this group, what the state is forcing this group to do is to put their goals and objectives into place, but the rest of the standards will be held off till next August of 13 to finish those up. What is happening is they're going out and requesting different projects to come forward. So let's say, for instance, that Centerville has a project, a $100,000 pipeline they want to put in, and so they apply for it. Once they apply for it, they start going through the IRWM process. Well, all of a sudden they'll say, well, you're going to get that $100,000 to do your project. Oh, and by the way, you're going to have to sign this form over here that you're going to comply with climate action plan, with data management. We are walking into one heck of a minefield. Now, granted, there's state money out there, but do we sell ourselves down the drain and our rights down the drain to get our own money back in the form of a grant from California Department of Water Resources? This morning here, you're going to have a presentation by Mr. Guy of NACWA, Northern California Water Association. NACWA tried for years to try to get a plan going. They finally gave up. And the main reason they gave up was because the California Department of Water Resources kept changing the ground rules. And they're changing the ground rules through this. If somebody reads through this whole 84 pages of this, you look on page 74, you got to fill a form out to even apply, telling you that you know this. And most of the board members in TAC committee have not even read, by their own admission, have not even read the 84 pages that's driving this whole thing. So this county, you need to be worried about what's going on with this. Thank you very much for your time.
R1. Receive an update from Northern California Water Association activities from the NACWA President, David Guy. And as Mr. Guy gets up here, get ready, I just would remind people that the Northern California Water Association has a number of members in it. There are 3 counties that are members of this, Butte, Tehama, and Shasta. There are 2 county members that sit on that board. Tehama County has Bob Williams, and I sit on it for Shasta County. I asked Mr. Guy to come here today because, as you know, I come back to my meetings when we have those and give reports back to the board and to the public, but I wanted to have an opportunity for the board members to hear directly from Mr. Guy what the services and the advocacy that they provide for us on water issues. And I will tell you that Mr. Guy will do a little bit of a self-introduction here, but he's extremely knowledgeable about water issues, and I think we're very fortunate to have him as our president of NACWA. So, Mr. Guy, thank you for coming up here today.
Thank you, Supervisor Modi. Can you hear me if I stand
Yes.
back here?
Yes.
Great. Okay. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Supervisors. It's a real pleasure to be here today, and good to see everybody here in the room. Northern California Water Association represents water suppliers and local governments, as Supervisor Modi mentioned, throughout the region from Sacramento north to Redding, of course, the Sierra Nevada on the east, the Coast Range on the west. And of course, the real common mission, of course, is to protect the water rights and the water supplies for this region, both now as well as, of course, into the future. We're real pleased. Supervisor Modi is a tremendous leader in the organization, and we appreciate his work that he does, not only on behalf of NACWA, but of course for the region and all the good work in this supervisor chamber. We're also fortunate, Pat Minturn, we work very closely with Pat, who's been a wonderful person to work with over the years, and then Stan Longberg and David Cox are also here in the room, of course folks that are making sure that water is being provided to folks within this county. So I was going to do a quick flyover today of some of the water issues and the challenges facing, of course, Shasta County, and then I'm going to try to go as fairly quickly, and I'd love, of course, to have time for questions and conversation if that's possible. I think it's always helpful to start with looking at what's the statewide water picture look like as of right now. And I think everybody knows this was kind of an odd year. We had that kind of dry spell at the beginning of the year and then the late rains, and it, as the water managers in the room will attest, it's been a crazy year to try to put water into people's ditches and in people's homes. But the long and short of it is that the water supplies for the Central Valley Project, for the most part in Northern California this year, are at 100%, whether you're one of the settlement contractors like ACID, Redding, or some of the water service contractors, which includes, of course, Clear Creek, Bella Vista, and others. The M&I contracts are still at 75%, which is a little bit of a problem, but the rest of the supplies are at 60%, and then of course a bunch of individual water rights that varies, but most of those are around 100% this year, not all. I'm going to give a quick flyover of the Bay Delta, and of course when you sit in Redding here, you know, you look south at Sacramento probably in a lot of crazy ways and kind of go, what's really going on in Sacramento? And of course water is no exception to that. There's a lot going on in Sacramento with respect to water, as I think folks know, and I'm going to try to give a quick flyover of that. Long and short of it is, when you cut through the what's going on, the two issues that we're focused on are flows and fees, the two F's. The question of, are we going to have to put additional water into the river to fix the delta problems, and are there going to be additional fees and other potentially taxes on folks in Northern California? And so I'm going to go over that a little bit. The regulatory landscape is really driving the discussion. There was a major legislative package back in 2009, as probably folks remember, and out of that came a variety of regulatory proposals. And is what these proposals tend to look at, again, with respect to flows, is you'll see terms like let's restore the system to a natural hydrodynamic. The State Water Board talks about unimpaired flows, and then there's other terms, but essentially all of these are the question of, do we need more flows in the Bay Delta? And of course the question that all of you are asking, that we ask, is where is that water going to come from? I'm going to go through four quick processes. The State Water Board, the SWRCB, is the process that has control over water rights in California, at least most water rights. And they are going through a process right now of updating a Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. They have started on the San Joaquin River system, and so we've been watching that process very closely. And again, looking at trying to provide additional flows into the delta from the San Joaquin River. There was a hearing last week where they have begun the process on the Sacramento River to look at the Bay Delta Water Quality Control Plan. And the important part there is that the State Water Board seems to be looking at this unimpaired flow concept, which again is trying to restore the system to more of a natural concept. And they're looking at 60%, 40%, and 20% of unimpaired flows. And I'll talk about that in a moment, because we've had some of our expert modelers look at that, and I will talk a little bit about what the impacts of that might be on Northern California. The Water Board is going to be having workshops later this year that we have been working with them on trying to fashion so that we get some good science into the process, if possible, including some science, of course, that talks about Northern California. And then they're hoping to have a plan by 2013 on this Bay Delta. So this is one that we have to watch very closely. Obviously showing a picture here near and dear with Lake Shasta, and the bottom line is that when you look at those percent of unimpaired flow concepts that I just mentioned that the State Water Board has thrown around, our modelers have shown is that you will reduce carryover storage in Lake Shasta drastically in devastating ways during certain years. And of course, as we all know, and you know better than anybody, that has a variety of impacts on this community. It obviously has water supply impacts to certain folks that rely upon that storage. It has recreational impacts. It has hydropower dynamics. I think, as folks know, we have been joining with with Reading Electric Utility on a series of letters. Also SMUD, the Public Works Department in Reading, has been really focused on some of the hydro issues as well. And then of course it also affects salmon and the cold water pool for salmon in the area. So when you look at what the State Water Board has proposed, this is, I think, a pretty accurate picture of what some of their proposals would look like. Again, the numbers have basically said that you would reduce carryover storage. And could you imagine going into this current year if we did not have the carryover storage in some of these reservoirs? Remember those early dry periods in the year. And you know, the good news in California is that people were very nervous, but nobody was panicking because we had carryover storage, right, for all the variety of purposes. Well, the proposal from the Water Board would reduce this carryover storage on the magnitude of 2.2 million acre feet. That's a lot of water to a million acre feet under a 40% scenario. There would also, of course, be a resulting increase in groundwater use. And the bottom line is that, in my view, it would debilitate California's ability to prepare and serve water during drought because of that ability to not store water. So we have basically obviously been very engaged in this process through Northern California Water Association, working with the managers and the local governments throughout the region, a variety of partnerships. The effects, of course, would be not only on the water supplies, the economic engine for the region, but also on the Pacific Flyway, the birds. It would be on the salmon. The cold water pool would be drastically affected. The hydropower issues are quite stark when you look at changing this, and then, of course, look at recreation and groundwater pumping. And we have articulated this in some fairly sophisticated ways, not only making the statements, but also having some of our experts with science supporting these comments. Again, the Water Board is having workshops later this year on a variety of these topics, again looking at salmon, the fish in the delta, and then of course the water supply effects, including both water supplies and hydropower. One of the things that, of course, we like to mention in Sacramento is that there's already a variety of in-stream flow requirements in the North State, and this is a map that just shows some of these. The system is tightly regulated. All of these agreements have been designed around trying to balance between the economic purposes and, in most cases, salmon in the North State. And, of course, any proposal in the Delta, in our view, would adversely affect the ability to meet all of these various purposes in the North Delta. So there's a variety of existing requirements, many of which you're familiar with in this area. Switching gears, the second part of the discussion, the biological opinions. These are the opinions that are issued by the federal fishery agencies, and I'm not going to talk a lot about these, but these govern the operations of the State Water Project and the Central Valley Project. You may have heard last year there was some litigation that came out of the Fresno court that kind of put some of these in disarray, and so the agencies are back looking at these biological opinions, and again, we've been weighing in with our biologists, with our hydrologists, our modelers, and again, trying to make sure that these biological opinions are advanced in a rational way for Northern California. One of the frustrating parts to a lot of folks is that those biological opinions have not been a very satisfactory process, and so some folks in the southern part of the state have looked at this Bay Delta Conservation Plan, and you hear probably a little about BDCP. And of course, that is what gets focused on in this process is the idea of delta conveyance, moving water through the delta, you know, kind of the peripheral canal debate, the through delta, whatever you want to call it. But there's an aggressive effort to advance the Bay Delta Conservation Plan process in Northern California. We have made a very strategic decision, working with all of our legal folks, to not be a part of that Bay Delta Conservation Plan because we don't need the coverage under the Endangered Species Act in Northern California. But with that said, we are very much engaged in the process, talking to folks on a regular basis, making sure that those impacts from this project are not going to be redirected to Northern California. But again, the issues in this, of course, are flows and fees. And we have had a variety of correspondence recently with the Resources Agency, and again, they keep assuring us that we do not contemplate the use of any water from the Sacramento Valley, but again, we're not taking that as the gospel. We are, again, looking at every modeling aspect of this, and we'll continue to stay very engaged in that. The final piece is the Delta Plan. This is the Delta Stewardship Council. They just came out with a draft last week of their new plan. We're still kind of sorting through that. There still seems to be a kind of an effort to try to, again, go to this somehow this natural hydrodynamic, which again can have an impact on Northern California. California. We're going to be sorting through that, engaging with the Stewardship Council. The Stewardship Council is not a regulatory body, but it uses kind of a political pulpit to encourage some of the other regulatory bodies that we just talked about to act. And again, we're going to be watching for flows and fees. Finally, on the fiscal side of the equation, obviously very much of an interest, we have been in litigation with the State Water Board going on 9 years now. We had a case that went to the California Supreme Court on the the validity of the State Water Board fees, and that case is now back to the trial court, and we're going to be going to trial on that in December of this year. And again, we're very concerned with the way the State Water Board has imposed fees on water right holders in Shasta County as well as elsewhere throughout the state. And there's obviously going to be a lot of discussion. Everybody's watching, of course, the governor's revenue plans with interest, and of course the one way or another, whether those pass in November or not, we're all going to be watching the fee element very closely with respect to water issues, of course, as well as other issues as well. So I'm going to kind of leave it at there. I think the important thing is we, of course, keep making sure that we do not believe that the Sacramento Valley, of course, should be sacrificed for the benefit of the Delta. There's a lot of interest in the Delta, both for export water supplies as well as flows into the ocean. And of course, we believe that the Sacramento Valley is a special place, and obviously you live that every day. You're leaders in that effort, and so that is where we have really been focusing. And we have a website, obviously, for those who are interested. Again, I really want to thank the leadership of Supervisor Modi and others in the room on water issues, and would welcome questions or any conversation that you would like to have. So thank you for the opportunity to be here today.
Thank you, Mr. Guy. A couple things before I ask for some questions. You would take the opportunity to just give us a little oversight of your background?
Yes, yeah, thank you. I have had the opportunity to work in the water world. I guess it's been almost 20 years now, and have a little bit of a multidisciplinary training. I'm a lawyer by training, and don't hold that against me, but in the water world, that's a valuable tool. And also a geology by training, so I've been able to integrate that. And I've had 2 stints at Northern California Water. Started there back in, I want to say, '99, and was there for 8 years. And then I had the opportunity to go down and run a nonprofit in Yosemite, so went down there for 3 years. And then just by a change of some circumstances, I came back here 2 years ago. And so I've really enjoyed the challenge, and of course love Sacramento Valley, love what you all do, and want to make sure that we have water for this region for the future.
And I mentioned that there are some counties that are members of NACWA, but there also are other water agencies and water users in general. Does that kind of cover it, or is there a little bit more?
Well, it's really, we're bound together, of course, by water and the need to protect the water rights and the water supplies for the future. So yeah, it's a variety of water entities. That includes water districts, water companies, municipalities, and then of course the counties. So it's kind of a broad array of folks that either serve water or care deeply about water.
So I'll look to see if anybody from the board would have some questions. Mr. Kehoe?
Mr. Guy, thank you for your presentation this morning. As you may recall, during the open time section of our agenda, one of our speakers expressed to us a certain amount of skepticism, or if you will, caution in dealing with the state of California. Do you have any observations about his observations?
Well, I think, it's easy to say, yeah, we ought to, absolutely, we ought to have caution with the state of California. There's a lot of, we all know where the economic centers of this state are, and they're to the south and the west, and you have the one thing in this region that everybody else in the state wants, and it'll probably always be that way unless something miraculously happens with respect to technology. So yeah, I think you always proceed with these with a very much of a caution, but I think the important thing is that I do think the most effective defense against that is local control and managing the supplies at the local level through the way the districts do it in Shasta County and elsewhere. And I think anything that you can do to improve management, to encourage management, to protect those water rights and supplies, I really believe that that is the most effective defense against the state, against the federal government, and those pressures are always going to be there. So I don't think that you can, it's really a game of perseverance in my view. You can't let up for a second, because if anybody blinks, that's when bad things happen.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Haas?
Well, earlier on we had a presentation about this NWAPA 21, and they mentioned building a lot more dams. What's the chances of building more dams? I mean, we need the Sites Reservoir built. We've talked about this
Yes.
for years.
Yes. Yeah, you and I've had that conversation for years.
We've had it for a long time.
Yes, no, thank you. Yeah, I didn't mention that, but I really should have. And, you know, I think there's two projects in Northern California, of course, that have had quite a bit of study, and that includes the Sites Reservoir just west of Maxwell, as well as, of course, the opportunities to raise Shasta. And those are, you know, different projects, but they're both, I think, they have a lot of merit. There's the feasibility work, some of that came out last year on Lake Shasta, and so I think folks have had a chance to look at that. I think, again, there's some real value that could come from that potentially, and a lot of questions, obviously, too. Sites Reservoir, there's going to be an environmental document on that later this summer, and I think that will be a real good glimpse for people to look at the water supplies. And again, I think the important part of these projects that I see is that, you know, they're really not projects for Northern California per se, but they're projects that can help provide an additional amount of water into the Delta for uses in other parts of the state, and in turn, that will, you know, hopefully allow this region to continue to utilize its water supplies into the future. So you know, the reality is we do need to improve our water infrastructure in the state of California. You know, you mentioned the challenges with that. We all know that the regulatory climate is tricky in the state of California, but you know, again, it's a game of perseverance, and I think that these good projects are ultimately going to be built because the state of California needs them.
Well, they mentioned the fact that the runoff on this 100 miles from the ocean, you know, all the way up from clear to Alaska to Mexico, it gets the rainfall because it's close to the ocean. So there's got to be a way to trap more of this instead of letting it run. Just like this spring, you know, we didn't think we were going to get anything last winter, and then all of a sudden it came on, and luckily it did because
yes,
the lake's in good shape, but that was kind of a fluke. We don't get wet springs like this all the time to take care of those problems. So I noticed your picture there had Shasta Lake pretty low back in 76, 77. That's when that thing was low. It was just a big pond. So
yeah, and you guys know what that means for this community. I mean, that's the proposal, is that you would have that in a lot of years. It's pretty scary stuff.
You know, I was just going to follow up on Supervisor Keyhill's comment about the concerns with the state and, you know, on Proposition 84, and I'm sure you're familiar with Proposition 84. Is it something that we can just walk away from and ignore, or do we have to, or we need to be part of that process and try to take advantage of what's there?
Well, I think the important thing in my view is to just keep the local energy going and do what you need to do locally to protect the water supplies, improve the water supplies. I think that's really the important thing. You know, there's times when grant funding makes sense. And will help advance that, and then there's times when it probably doesn't make sense. But I think, you know, you make a local business decision on how you want to proceed with that, much like you do every day on, you know, whether you want federal funds for this or federal funds for that. You make a calculated business decision, and that's the way I look at it. And I think you've got a lot of really good leadership in this area, in this region, and in this local area. So, you know, I think you make the best decision you can as you go forward.
And I'd like for you just maybe just sum up with, I know that the agency and you, and along with our chair, advocate for a lot of issues. Could you just give us a little snippet of some of the things that we've been advocating for lately on behalf of water issues for Northern California?
Yeah, thank you. Well, again, most of the emphasis right now is in this regulatory environment, just by the nature, and that, of course, means all the state agencies, a little bit of the federal side as well. We also obviously spend quite a bit of time over in the legislature. This year has been fairly quiet, I say that cautiously, on water, but we know that you know, next year probably won't be, so we're obviously spending a lot of time in the legislative arena. We spent a lot of time in Washington, D.C. as well, you know, working with the congressional delegation and the senators and trying to advance some good water policy in the state of California. And then again, you know, like most organizations, we probably have you know, more lawyers than anybody wants to admit, but that's the important part of the water world. We have the best legal team in the state. I absolutely believe that, and doing a lot on the communication front, because again, I think we have to tell the story of this region and why water is critical to this region, and why people in LA should want water to be in this region. It's a hard story to tell, but it's one that we have to tell because they've got the numbers.
And I think that's what we've been doing over the last about year or so, trying to actually put information out about the uses of the water and how it occurs locally, and even our agriculture users provide more than just the food they raise. It's the wild fowl that use that and
Yeah.
the flyways, and so it's all interconnected, and there's a lot of multiple uses for that land and the water that's on it. So.
Yeah, no, that's really the Sacramento Valley. You guys know that very well. It's really that way that the systems are all fully incorporated, where you're managing water for farms, you're managing it for the refuges, the flyway, you're managing it for salmon. You know, that's just the world of water management today, and the Sacramento Valley, I think, does that better than anybody else in the state, and I think we ought to stand proud about that and try to convince the rest of the state that they ought to leave this region the way it is, because it's the best kept secret in the state.
And could I have you just repeat the website again for people who want additional information?
Yeah, thank you. It's www.norcalwater.org, so norcalwater.org.
Well, thank you, Mr. Guy, for coming. We certainly appreciate the time coming all the way up
Thank
here.
you. It's a real pleasure to be here and great to see you guys.
Thank you.
Thank you.